Wallace, and I am from the Fargo-Moorhead area. So I live in Moorhead, Minnesota, just across the river from Fargo, North Dakota. So I'm in the prairies, not in the big woods like you guys are in Wisconsin. But anyway, I'm here to share with you some of my experiences and some of the tunes that I've been learning over the past few years on the Hardanger Fiddle. And I am very excited to share a few different dances and some tuning techniques and the differences between the fiddle and the violin. I'll talk about some of that as well. But I think what I'll do is I think I'll start with another tune. Oh, I should talk about that first one. That's called a Vorspiel, so kind of a warm-up. I think it's a beautiful warm-up. I learned it listening to a recording from a really famous Norwegian fiddler that is a teacher in Oslo and a performer, Hogaliten. And it's a warm-up tune before maybe a concert, or before the dancing would begin. I think what I'm going to do for you next is I'm going to play a mazurka. So I'm going to play a series of little dance tunes that are more commonly done across Europe, and then I will transition to some more specific tunes to Norway a little bit later in the program. So I would like to share with you a mazurka right now, and I will play it on the Hardanger Fiddle first, and then I'll play it on my flat fiddle or my violin, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences. I have 4 strings on this Hardanger Fiddle, but I have 8 other ones underneath it. And so these are called sympathetic strings. And so as you can see from my pegs, I've got 8 pegs. So the 4 top strings and the 4 sympathetic strings. So lots of tuning happens when you play the Hardanger Fiddle. These sympathetic strings, I don't know if you can hear that. Oops, a little out of tune. They're actually, if you are familiar with Edvard Grieg's Peer Gynt Suite, that is the tune from the morning song. So in any case, it's just a little bit of a tidbit of information. But the strings on top are bowed, and then the sympathetic strings just ring and reverberate, making a very full sound. I will contrast this with my violin or flat fiddle. So still ringy, but I don't have those sympathetic strings. You might have also noticed that the tuning on the fiddle is a little different. Sorry, on the violin. On the Hardanger Fiddle, it's conventional to tune, even though we call this E, A, D, and G the same strings as the violin, you actually tune everything up between a half to a full step above. So this A string really is tuned to a B. So I think that the intent is to make it really a bright sounding and carry far and happy sounding for the most part, although there can be some mournful songs, as I'll share with you a little bit later on in this program with this fiddle. But in any case, this is really a solo instrument. It's commonly played for dances, sometimes for listening tunes as well, but dancing is really the key for this tunes, or for this instrument. And so often a fiddler would be in a room, big, huge room with lots of dancers, and he would need to be able to carry quite far. So I think in the spirit of dancing, I'm going to play a polka for you. This is called the Wild West Polka. trills and things like that. And so that's really a hallmark of the Hardanger fiddle playing. Now, actually, to go back to the flat fiddle, so this is common all over Europe and certainly into Norway as well. And this is solely played in Norway on the east side of the country. And this Hardanger fiddle became, it was probably a development of the Baroque fiddle, but really took on a life of its own and is commonly played in the western part of Norway and the central part of Norway. And so there are musicians who will play both, certainly, but there are tunes that are specific to the Hardanger fiddle. It's also known as the Hardingfele. All right, I'm going to play for you a waltz called the Broteslatten, and it's got a little bit more of a minor feel to it. I'm going to play one more tune in kind of this set, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about my history and experiences learning the fiddle. I'll talk a little bit about the dress that I'm wearing, and then I'll play a few more tunes that are specific to the Hardanger fiddle. All right, next I'm going to play a Rhinelander, which is actually the same thing as a Schottish, and I really like this one. It's a Rhinelander efter Ivar Fugelstad. And I think that what's notable about it is you can really hear the sympathetic strings, and you can also hear a lot of unison. So we often play, so as you notice, I'm playing double stops almost the entire time. And so double stops mean two strings at once. And the flatness of the bridge facilitates that, as well as very little distance between the string and the fingerboard. Which means that it has to be made very precisely. But then it's easy for me to put down my fingers and cover several notes at once. And that makes it so that the solo instrument sounds a lot fuller than just it normally would without all of those aspects to it. All right, here's the Rhinelander. Sometimes there's a lot of octaves that are used as well to give it kind of that bass feeling in addition to the unison notes. All right, let's see. I would like to play a few tunes now that are more specific to Norway, in fact, certain regions of Norway. And so I'm going to transition to a bridal march from a particular valley in the Baldric Valley, which is kind of in the center of Norway. So I'll play the Bridal March for you first, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. because I learned it. One of the first tunes I learned actually when I started playing this fiddle a couple years ago. I played the violin since I was 7, and I play in the Fargo Moorhead Symphony, and I do a lot of classical music and kind of American fiddling. But I picked up the Hardanger Fiddle a couple of years ago and have been really enjoying the challenge because it's a little different, and the rhythms are different, and the techniques are a little different. And so it's so much fun. And let me just say that one of the best places to start if you're interested in learning anything about this instrument is with an organization called the Hardanger Fiddle Association of America, HFAA. And so they have a nice presence on the web, and you can look up information about their summer workshops for music and dancing. They always have instructors from Norway as well as across the US and Canada come and share their expertise with us for a workshop at the Folklore Center near Madison, Wisconsin. And they also have information on loaners for instruments, so adults and children can apply for getting one of these instruments for a year and trying it out. And there are teachers around the US. My teacher, I've started lessons this last year. That's my pandemic project, is to really learn a lot more about this fiddle. And my teacher, Vidar Skreda, lives in Milwaukee, and he is from Norway, and he moved here about 4 or 5 years ago. And I just can't thank Vidar enough because he has really adopted several of us in the Fargo Moorhead area and has visited frequently to provide workshops and instruction for us. And we now have a very thriving Fargo Spellemannslag full of, gosh, sometimes it's up to a dozen fiddle players. And there's several people in our area that are actually making fiddles, and they are studying with a fiddle maker named Bud Larson from Brainerd, Minnesota. And so it's alive and well in the Fargo Moorhead area, this tradition. And we're very excited to share it with more people and encourage them because it's really just a lot of fun. All right, so I think I forgot to tell you the rest of the story. That Bridal March I played is typical in the Baldric Valley. And my husband has Norwegian relatives who live in the Baldric Valley. And a few years ago, we visited them. And they're having a lot of fun watching me learn about this fiddle because they don't know a whole lot about the Hardanger Fiddle. It is more of a traditional instrument, and they've kind of moved on to country and rock and pop and other kinds of music. But they do know other players in the area. And so I played a few tunes for them, and they didn't recognize most of them, but when I played that Bridal March, they said, "Oh yes, we hear that. We hear that tune in the churches. We hear that at weddings." And so I was really thrilled to find out that some of that music is alive and well, just with the general public, in addition to the kind of subculture of Norwegians as well as Americans that are studying the traditional dance and music that is produced by this instrument. All right, so I'm going to go on to another tune that is in 6/8. It's kind of a walking tempo, but not as slow as the march that you just heard. And this one's called Anders Hogaliten, and it's really nice and smooth tune. And it is also known as a bridal tune, but not necessarily a march. share with you a few tunes that are dance tunes that are specific to the Hardanger Fiddle and to specific regions of Norway. And so the first tune I want to play for you is quite energetic. It's a halling. And I don't know if you've ever seen dances where usually it's male dancers will be dancing around in a circle, Norwegian dancers, and they will be doing all these acrobatics. And they're gearing up to jumping into the air and trying to kick a hat off of a broomstick. And so there's a lot of theatrics and a little bit of drama and a lot of competition between the individual dancers that are dancing around, and they keep on trying until there's one left that is kick the hat off as high as possible. And so it's a really athletic dance. There's lots of jumps and kicks and things like that, and so it's really fun. Recently, I just want to say that recently they have opened it up a bit, and there are some female halling dancers as well. And in 2019, the Landskappleiken, which is the national dance and traditional music competition, they have one every year. One of the young women actually won her age group, and so that was kind of exciting too. So here's a halling. So listen for, there's a lot of interaction between the fiddler and the dancers, and sometimes the fiddler will try to anticipate the jumping. There's lots and lots of different hallings, and they are just always a lot of fun to play. All right, I'd like to share with you a set of tunes that are springers, and springers are in 3/4, and they are unique to the Hardanger Fiddle and unique forms of dancing. And Springer means running, so it's like a running dance, and so you're always thinking about moving forward. And so the first tune I'm going to play is from the West Coast, and it is a more even 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or as my teacher says, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. You're just springing along. And so I'm going to play that one first, and then I'm going to play a Springer from Telemark. That's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then finally a Springer from Baldric, which is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so they're slightly different. They're a little bit uneven, and they are challenging to learn. So let's see how it goes. Here's the West Coast one. To actually tune on camera, because that is something you do a lot with this fiddle. In fact, when I attended the Landskappleiken a couple of years ago just to see the master fiddlers play, some of them would spend 5 or 10 minutes tuning before they even started their competition tunes, and that was allowed because there's so many strings to tune to make everything resonate just right. All right, so now here is a Telemark Springer. It's Hogaliten. it's out of tune. I remember when I first was learning this music, I was thinking, what's going on? They're playing these notes that are out of tune. But that is done on purpose. So a lot of times there'll be dissonant chords that are just part of the interest and kind of carrying out and listen so the dancers can hear that. So that is definitely a hallmark of these tunes as well. So here is the Baldric Springer, so another form of a 3/4 dance tune, where again the dancers would be dancing in a circle with couples, but it's like a running dance, and they would spring up every once in a while, according to the 3/4 time. That I was going to talk with you a little bit about the dress that I'm wearing. And so I'll stand up and you can see there's a skirt to it and a vest and a blouse, and there's some fancy buttons. So this would be more of a generic festival dress, a festdracht. I don't have a bunad, which I'd love to have someday, and bunads are women's dresses that are unique to the valley or the area that they come from. And so Valdres, Telemark, Setesdal, Hallingdal, all those places would have their own specific style of bunad. And a bunad, a young woman would get a bunad and wear it throughout their entire life, and wear it to weddings and other important events. And so there are some people, there's someone in the Fargo Spelmanslag who has studied bunads with a woman in Ely, Minnesota, and has made her own. And it's just gorgeous. It's from Hallingdal, and it's got embroidery all over the place, and it's a special hat and everything. So if you're interested in learning more about bunads, traditional bunads, you can look those up on the web and find the bunad that would match a particular area of Norway that you're interested in. I'm going to play a few things now that are in a different tuning. And so I tuned my G string down for these first two tunes, and then I'm going to tune it even more lower to what's called the loose string tuning for the last tune. So I'm going to play a tune called Grautet Faro. It's a rule, which is like a walking tune when you're dancing. And it is, think about a big pot of porridge that's being stirred over and over again. that tuning. It's a gonger that I learned from a wonderful fiddle player named Knut Hamre, and he came over to teach at the HFAA workshop a couple summers ago, and so we begged him to teach us this tune. So I'm going to share with you the most recent tune I've been learning in my lessons with Vidar, and it is a Gorlaus tune from Setesdal area, and that is an area of Norway that's kind of south-central, that historically, when a lot of these tunes were being composed and these styles were being developed, was really shut off from all other areas of Norway. So it has a very kind of ancient feel to this music, and it's quite unique. And there's often a galloping type beat that I'll try to see if you can hear on the recording that my feet are doing. And so Gorlaus means loose string, and so this low string, this G string, is tuned way down. And my teacher just told me that actually this is called the trance tuning because it kind of puts the fiddler and the dancers into a trance. And so see if you agree or not as I play this tune for you. Tune like that. And so what my teacher told me is that the story goes that the fiddler would be playing, sitting on a chair in the middle of the dance floor at the beginning of the evening and galloping away with that galloping beat. And by morning, the chair and the fiddler would be flat against the wall because of the vigorous galloping from that the Gorlaus tune in the Setesdal style. But the fiddler, of course, would still be playing. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the history of this fiddle. I won't go into great detail, but I will say that it has been around for several hundred years in Norway, and was quite popular and is still popular now. But there was a time in the 1800s when it was not so popular, and in fact, some of these beautiful instruments were burned because people saw them as the devil's instrument. And so there was a kind of a very conservative religious movement, and this kind of music and dancing was antithetical to that movement. And so some of the best fiddles in Norway were actually burned, and some of them escaped by coming over with immigrants, people emigrating from Norway into the US and Canada and bringing their fiddles with them. And so it's really got a lot of history and a lot of fascinating facts regarding how this fiddle is viewed in Norway. I would say right now, especially since the 70s, it's been elevated quite a bit. There's a lot of interest in a lot of young Spellemannslag groups forming for students to learn to play this fiddle. So it's definitely experiencing a resurgence. But because of that history, this is an instrument that was not played in the church. In fact, the story has it that churches will have a fiddler's stone, so that even during a wedding, for example, the fiddler will lead the bridal party to the church, but then the fiddler will lay the fiddle down on the stone and not bring it into the church, so it was not allowed. That has changed to some extent, and there also have been a few composers who have decided to buck that trend and to compose some music that is specifically for the church. And so here's a tune I'd like to play for you called "The Lost Sheep." So that is a very mournful tune, and it has a lot of religious overtones to it, and you could play that in church. The other really fun fact about that tune is that it is the theme song for the movie Fargo. And so if you want to check it out, you can go ahead and Google Fargo and theme song, and you can hear that mournful tune played several times throughout the movie. And the Norwegians love that movie. Whenever I tell them I'm from Fargo, they want to hear that tune, and they're very excited about it. So that is one kind of surprising connection between the U.S. and Norway at this point in time. I think I will close out right now and say thank you so much for joining this program. I wish I could be there in person. Maybe someday I can. But meanwhile, it's been a lot of fun putting together these tunes for you, and I hope that I've piqued your interest in the Hardanger Fiddle. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Lola will be able to give you my contact information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or connect you to people that I know who can answer your questions about this beautiful instrument. Thank you very much.